our first, actually, our first video podcast episode that we've done. Usually it's just audio, but this is our first video podcast, and with, you know, somebody who's outside of the state of Texas. So that's kind of like, you know, two birds with one stone there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us. And you can tell I really dressed up for the occasion, and I'm in my nice mobile office here.
I'm thinking, do I need to do hair and makeup now?
Yeah. I want to open the floor to you. Yeah. Well, I want to open the floor to you, and I really want to start with your background and how you came into the field of architecture. What inspired you to get into architecture?
You know, and Brent, I'll just say one more thing before you jump in, and that's I know I know you've done a podcast before, at least one, because I watched a little clip or two from it. But you know, if this type of thing, if you ever need to pause, or you know, this is an editable deal. So
yep. Okay,
our kind of we really care about bringing people in and it being a discussion and just making it comfortable for people as we're talking, which so we like to say that kind of at the beginning, to say some people have never done a podcast, they come on a little bit nervous or whatnot, but just kind of wanted to say, hey, you know, this is not a it's really meant to be just a conversation.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And you said you saw one that I did. I mean, I've probably done 2 or 3 in the last 2 years. It's like a new thing for me. And I look at something like this. I haven't done one this way. I've done them in person, and only one of them I think was actually recorded with video. So yeah, no, I look at this like it's just a Zoom call, you know. So you could be sitting across the table from me right now. Yeah. In fact, that would be better, and then we could have like a glass of wine or something.
That would be better.
Or a Sierra Nevada little thing, IPA.
Now we're talking. Yeah, come on.
Although I'm sure there's a Texas IPA that you guys prefer.
Got us.
But by the way, I love Texas. I've wanted to do work in Texas. I finally got a house built on Lake LBJ that I did for a couple that I met, was designing a home for them in Sedona, and then COVID hit, and then they got nervous, and so they sold the lot in Sedona, and that project went on hold. And then they called about 6 months later and said, well, actually, they didn't know that I knew that they had sold the property and that the project went on hold. So they called a few months later and said, well, I got some good news and some bad news. And I was like, okay. And they said, well, the bad news is we sold the lot in Sedona, which it was a magical lot. I mean, it was really amazing. But then they said, well, but the good news is we bought a waterfront lot on Lake LBJ in Texas. And I was like, I've always wanted to do that. And literally down the street, because they had referenced it, like there's this really cool house down the street. It's a Lake Flato house.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh my God. You know, I mean, when I talk and try to preach about authentic architecture. You know, when I look at what those guys do and what a lot of architects in Texas do, there's a lot of great architects in Texas. I'll tell you that. I've gone to the AIA home tour in Austin a couple years, where I've just flown in and just gone to just to go to that tour. Yeah. It's remarkable, and in our market we have. The latest hot trend is the modern farmhouse, and it just frankly it makes me sick because it looks like it's like people are designing homes that look like they belong in Iowa and they're putting them in Arizona, which just makes no sense. But when I think of like, okay, what's a true modern? I think back to the kind of work that happens in your state that I see a lot by, again, people like Lake Flato and people like that really have an understanding for kind of, the vernacular of I don't know if I'm using the right term, but it's like that vernacular, that place that you are, and it's modern architecture that has roots that are 400 years old. And I just love that because you can see the pedigree of that 400 years of kind of site built architecture without architects. That people built buildings to survive the climate and to respond to the place that they were. And now you get to see that manifested in a modern way. To me, that is kind of what authentic architecture is, and figuring out, what is that authentic thing? What is that spirit of that place? Or what is the weather telling you need to do so that, your electric bills aren't, sky high and that sort of. Yeah, right. So anyway, love Texas. Hope get an opportunity to do some more work there someday.
Well, you know what? Brent, you're touching on some things that, as Lonnie and I were talking about, what do we want to talk with you about? One of the things that came up was regionalism, and Scottsdale and Arizona as a whole is known for this, amazing desert architecture. It's obviously a very arid climate. But you kind of already, you were diving into something there about some of the differences between designs and houses that are built in Texas versus where, and I know you do work, other places as well, but I think we'd love, and Lonnie, I don't mean to be jumping off script here, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on that. Of what does it mean to have?
Totally fine. I think that's a good segue into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just what's your thought on regionalism? Regionalism. What does that mean to you, and how does that affect y'all's work?
Well, I use it when people ask me to put a label on what we do. I try to call it something like regional modern, or regional organic modern. This also kind of dives into my my story of how I became an architect, kind of thing. Yeah, I grew up in the Chicago area, which from an architect standpoint is an amazing place to grow up. I mean, it's kind of the birthplace of modernism, and I was always somewhat artistic, but as a kid, growing up in the woods and all that, I grew up in a home that my mom designed and my mom and dad built. And it was kind of a mid-century modern home that was inspired by, I'm going to forget the name, what was it, Dow, but the architect, it was a famous kind of organic architect. I think he might have been an apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright's. He had the advantage business-wise of he was of the Dow chemical family, so that always helps. But he did amazing work, and it just, there's a home that he did that inspired my parents so much that they drove up to Michigan to see the home and then design a home very similar. So I was fortunate to grow up in a creative, unique environment that way. And as being kind of a kid of the 60s, spent my days were like running out of the house at 8 o'clock in the morning during the summer and returning for dinner, and going out into the trees and swamps and building forts and all that kind of stuff. And so nature, and I always had a connection with nature. So, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with kind of my creative artistic self. I'm a drummer as well, so I thought maybe I'll be a drummer, maybe I'll be a cartoonist. And then literally my mom, who, of her generation, she always wanted to be an architect, but there just wasn't a lot of women architects back in those days. And she gave me or opened a book that was hers from college, and it was a Frank Lloyd Wright book. And I swear to God, by like page 6 or 7, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I think the reason for that is it made such a connection. I'm not a Taliesin guy. I didn't go to, Taliesin. I got more of a traditional education, all that sort of thing. So I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid necessarily. But what spoke to me was when I looked at Frank Lloyd Wright's work, it was all so site specific. It was all kind of based in nature. It was all like, don't fight nature, work with nature. And I had the, I was probably 10 miles from Oak Park and River Forest, and I had a mother who was a designer, and we would drive up to Wisconsin and go to Spring Green, and just we would drive around the countryside, and through these hilly wooded areas, and you'd see a big stone slab on a driveway, and it would have something that was carved in it, and it would be in like Frank Lloyd Wright's kind of font. And you knew at the end of that driveway, which might be a quarter mile up a hill, there was a Frank Lloyd Wright house. And my mother is, she's still with us, thank goodness. But she's never been shy of driving up somebody's driveway to see something cool. So we would often drive up and see Frank Lloyd Wright homes. But I always also remember, like, you drive around the countryside and you'd see what would appear to be rock outcroppings in Wisconsin, and it would be a Frank Lloyd Wright home.
Wow.
And it was something, so it just looked like it grew out of the earth. And then I was also very interested in like passive solar architecture. So one of the reasons I ended up going to Arizona State was because they were very big on passive solar, and again, using nature to kind of design a home to work with nature. I love the look of the homes. A lot of them, I'm going to forget the name of, William Morgan out of, you probably don't even know who that is, but he was a well-known architect, probably had 20 houses and record houses back in the day, out of Dade County. But he did earth integrated, like kind of passive solar architecture, and super modern, but it just, every move responded to either letting the sun in or keeping the sun out, or filtering, the sun, creating a climate within the home that was very livable, not fighting it. And so that always inspired me. So the whole idea of, regionalism. And then, of course, when I came to ASU, it was right about when kind of the whole postmodernism thing broke. And I'm glad I, went west instead of east, or I'd probably, be doing, neoclassical architecture today. I don't know. But there was a side of that about, kind of context and history and pulling that aspect into it. So when I would see work, I mean, I look at some of, Lake Flato's work, and there's a lot of history in some of that work. I'm sure if you grew up in Texas, you've driven by, a 200-year-old farmhouse, and then gone by a Lake Flato building and gone, I see the connection instantly. And so it's kind of trying to figure out, it's not just the climate and what kind of, weather is telling you that you need to do, but it's also kind of the spirit of the place. What is that? I mean, when I think of like buildings in New Mexico's right next to Texas, and yet it's very different. That vernacular of architecture, is it the building tools they had, or is it the fact that you guys have more limestone than you know what to do with, or I don't know, but there's also a history there that I think informs that. So unfortunately, when we work out of state, trying to gather all of that kind of information, it's not as easy as when you kind of grew up with it. But it is something that we want to try to understand, is what is the spirit of that place. And then, of course, there's all those kind of determinants, like, do we keep the sun out? Do we let the sun in? Do we invite the breeze? Do we keep that out? Do we have to use, triple pane everything and insulate the heck out of everything? And we're doing a home in Montana right now that I think has like 3 redundant systems, because it's like it gets to 22 below zero there, and it might do that for a week and a half, and an emergency generator doesn't last that long. So how do you survive that?
That's insane.
So anyways, that's a lot.
That's a good I wanted to ask, like, what are, in your climate, what are some of the biggest design challenges that you face?
Well, I mean, it not to state the obvious, but the sun is the biggest. So to me, Sun is the most important thing that we have here. It's literally sunny here. What's the average? Like 360 days a year or something. We have sunshine here. So, you know, it's something that you need to keep out of your house if you want to keep, you know, the energy bills low. If you don't want your really expensive furniture and millwork fading and all those, you don't want your, you know, paintings on the wall deteriorating, those kinds of things. So you want to keep it out. But it's also, I say it's like it's the biggest paintbrush in kind of in the toolbox, if you will, or the paint can or whatever it may be. It's if you work with it, now you can create architecture that not only keeps the sun out, but then invites the sun in the right places and then creates almost a kinetic thing. I mean, I was literally at a job site today where we've got this cast in place entry foyer. It's actually out, it's exterior. You go through this exterior kind of private courtyard with this giant gate that opens to allow the FedEx guy to drop off the package and close it, lock it, and then leave. And then the owners can come through their, you know, really cool glass door, you know, into that space. But it's an exterior space, so we have like a big curved wall, and then but everything's like, the structure, all of it is cast in place concrete, which is pretty rare here because it's really expensive. But it's like, wow, we get to use concrete. What can we do? What does concrete want to do that things don't do well? And so, well, you can cast shapes in it. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. So we have this lid that has all these different size oculuses in it. And so just to see the sun come through the ceiling and cast these like eye-shaped, you know, because it's in an angle, so it's taking a circle and making these eye-shaped sunspots that march across the stone wall, and then the opposite concrete wall is a straight wall where the stone is curved, and the straight wall then has kind of almost like Legaretto or Berrigan-like slots in it, and the light comes in through that in a different way. The sun is like a whole light show, and you know, the sun is free, you know, building this concrete, you know, thing, not free, not even close, but anyways, but that's, to me, that's the beauty. And that, again, that's the kind of the spirit of being here. I mean, the difference in designing in Scottsdale versus designing in Minnesota or in the Chicago area where I'm from. Well, when you look at cloudy skies for weeks at a time, how valuable is creating some sort of a texture or a pattern on a wall versus here, something that protrudes out of a wall 1 inch will cast a 4-foot shadow. And that shadow will change throughout the day, and it'll be a sharp shadow. I mean, we've done like standing seam metal walls where we run the standing seam horizontally, and we kind of come up with some sort of metaphor of kind of cactus ribs and all this kind of stuff. But we've done studies where we track the sun in our 3D models to like, do we make it 1 inch out? Do we make it 1.5 inches out? What makes that wall change the most throughout the day? So every time the client walks by that, it's something new.
That's really cool.
That's really creative.
So it's you know, and I mean, I've been here a lot.
Like,
I'm sorry, what?
Polar opposite climate. You're designing a house that's in Montana. It's like the polar opposite climate to what you're seeing in Arizona. And I mean, how do you deal with the challenges of, you know, designing something that's in a climate that's completely different than what you're used to?
Well, you can't do it in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is, you know, you hope that you have, I mean, in our case, we have a client that's from that part of the country. We're working with other people up there that are from that part of the country. You try to understand what's unique about it. There's a lot that we, you know, didn't know, but I know more about, you know, I mean, we're so blessed in Scottsdale. I mean, the weather, you know, while it is hot, but it's very dry. So there's just all kinds of things that we don't worry about the same way you're going to worry about in Texas with the humidity, and you're going to worry about up there with snow. I mean, we do get some of that here because Flagstaff's at 7,000 feet, and they got lots of snow and so forth up there. But still, something that gets wet and damp, it dries out like in hours, not days here. But yeah, up there in Montana, a lot of it is having. I mean, I think we listen to the client, we listen to contractors up there. It's when I was up there, the one and only time I actually went up there and met the client and looked at the site before we designed anything. It was September, and it was just the end of fire season up there. So, I mean, it was pretty dramatic. It's like you realize fires are a real thing there, and you've got to design for it. So
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, somebody's spending, probably $8, $9, $10 million or more on, a home. You don't want to design it out of flammable materials that runs that risk. So, very much like they're learning in California. I mean, they're kind of rewriting the whole, design book in, Southern California, because everything has to try to. I mean, just simple things you don't even think about, like putting a vent in a roof, because you got to vent, whatever you have to vent in the house. But is that vent going to suck in an ember from 2.5 miles away? That's going to start your house on fire. That's a whole different thing to solve now.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Super crazy. Well, it's kind of interesting, Ben. I mean, you kind of already in some ways are starting to talk about some specific projects, and Lonnie and I had gone through and pulled a couple of images of just some of your work, and we wondered if maybe we could just share a screen and take a look at a couple of these projects that you've done, and just kind of dive into a few details on them and say, wow, tell me about, what were you doing in this area, or what was going on here? So I'd love to do that with you.
Sure.
All right. Can you see that okay?
I see that. I was actually at that house 2 nights ago for wine and dinner.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Lonnie, you want to
that is just so gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so Brent, I am not an architect. I am, full disclosure there. I've been building, my entire career, and but one thing that stuck out to me the most about, many of your desert homes was this really exaggerated roof structure. And, Michael, you could probably scroll through some different pictures, but that seemed to be a common thread on all of them, was these really exaggerated overhangs, big cantilevers, big roofs. And I kind of wanted to ask you, is this really driven by the climate that you're in? Because I kind of see this as like a sombrero, right? Like you're trying to stay out of the sun. So you have these massive roofs that cast big shadows, and or like a lizard crawling under a rock to try to get away from the heat. Like that's kind of what the picture that came into my mind with these exaggerated roofs. So I don't know if you can kind of shed some light on that.
Sure. I love the way you just described that, because I guess it kind of touches me in the right place, because it reinforces that what we've been trying to do is, at least appears that we're doing it. And that is, I remember when one of the homes you showed there was our Desert Wing home, which is about 20 years old now. But that was our first home to get a lot of kind of notoriety internationally and so forth. It was just one of those things where I sent pictures to an international website that I saw somebody, another Arizona architect's working there. It's like, oh my gosh, how did they get in there? So I just, emailed the I forget what it was called. It wasn't Arc Daily, but it was something like that. And to ask, how do I get in there? And I sent them a bunch of pictures. And the very next day I woke up And I literally had emails from Australia and Germany and all these places. They'd already posted these pictures. And
Wow.
but that home and what I try to say about all of our work is I want people to be able to look at our architecture, the work that we do, and maybe not know exactly where it is, but have a sense, that whole sense of place thing. I mean, the architecture should reflect in some way where it is. And so it looks like that's probably in the desert Southwest. Why is that in the desert Southwest? Because of the big overhangs, because of, not just the landscape and those kinds of things. I mean, there should be other clues that informed, that home's design that should be obvious to somebody, whether they're in Germany or Australia or some other place, on the planet, that gives them an idea of where that is. So, I've never been about kind of, universal design that, you take this little modern glass box and just duplicate it all over the place. I just feel like the fun, the joy that I get and kind of the artistic side of this is figuring out what is that spirit of that place and how do I manifest that in a piece of unique architecture that kind of expresses that in a unique way. So thanks for being observant of this. I mean, this home, we call it our desert geode home. It really, before I came up with the name desert geode, but it was what I was thinking of was this is a home that has exposure on a very large exposure on the west side, which is really a brutal exposure for us.
Here in this photo, which way is west in this? Are we
so to the left?
To the left. Okay.
The whole idea was
this is kind of the south that we're standing at right
Yes, now. Right. So this is facing south, which if you go, back into the website and look at the pictures from this house looking out, there's an amazing view of Camelback Mountain, which is a major iconic mountain in the center of the valley here. And, and this house was able to capture that. So I knew we needed a lot of glass in this house. And so the idea was to create this kind of crystalline interior and wrap it with this protective shell. So this picture is pretty good. You can see it starts on the right-hand side of the main house. You see a little bit of the kind of outdoor pavilion in front of that, but on the right-hand side, it wraps up and over and then down and then vertically down. So it's almost a solid western exposure. It's mostly solid towards the north because that's kind of the entry side and where the neighboring homes are, and that's where you want privacy, though it has clerestory windows, across the north side. So you get lots of daylight coming in from that nice soft northern light. But then the whole, back side is practically glass that just opens up towards the view and has ample protection from the sun, so that, we in a perfect world, we keep the sun out of the interior of the house all the time. 5 o'clock in the afternoon in December, that's not going to happen because the sun's just too darn low. That's why God made roller shades. But yeah. So I mean, you hit it right on the mark. That's what informs most of our homes. And I will tell you, from a very early age, I'm going to forget the name of this architect, but he was an architect that at the time in the 70s had been published in record houses more than any architect in history. And he did these amazing homes, mostly in the Hamptons. And darn, what was his name? I have his book. He's not that well known to people here, but his homes were very modern. I mean, there was aspects of it that were a lot of them that were very Misesian from a really slick modern standpoint, but then they would use large stone and a lot of very expressive roof forms, which I just always fell in love with. So I've always been inspired by that. And then coming out to Arizona, it's like, if you're going to build a shelter here, what's the first thing you do? You build a roof. It's just you have to shade to create comfort, and then rain that happens every now and then. You got to deal with that as well. But there's nothing more basic to just the most basic thing to shelter is a roof before you even get to the walls, I think. And so there's nothing more kind of iconic than, creating that sort of form.
Do any of your projects, do they have rainwater collection? Is that a common feature, or no?
It is. I mean, this house in particular. Now it's a lot of this. To be honest with you, this house was driven by the landscape architect who did a brilliant job and is really well known for doing, kind of whatever, I don't know if I'll call it like rain conservation or whatever, but she designed the landscape in this with all kinds of like lowered areas that would retain water. And then when that filled up, it would go down a runnel to another area and fill up. Like in this photo on the right-hand side, there's kind of where the stairs come down. To the right of the stairs, there are terraced gardens, and you see those kind of dark elements like little channels out of steel on the side. Well, those channels are intended when we don't get a lot of rain here, but when we get it all at once. I mean, I think we just had like 7 inches of rain. We've been going through a drought for 5 or 6 years, and then we kind of made up for that a week ago. Had a Friday and a Saturday where it rained harder than I've ever seen it. So all that water comes down, and you can either let that water just channel away and just run through the neighborhood and mess everything up and head towards a dry river bottom, or you can try and actually channel it into a planting bed and kind of supercharge the landscape that's in there and take advantage of that, which to me is it's a much more interesting thing to do. One of the homes you showed was our Desert Wing home, which is probably the oldest home that you showed that we've designed. And that roof was kind of this folded. The client during design used to describe it to her friends as she would take a napkin and like it's like a butterfly, but then it's folded again in the butterfly's folded in the opposite direction, and the corners are pulled up. And so in plan, it's a perfect rectangle, but in elevation, it's super dynamic. But what it does is it basically funnels all the rainwater. It catches all the rainwater, and then we collected that, and we basically dispersed that into the landscape. We've looked into was it cisterns and that sort of thing. We don't get enough rain here, or often enough, to make those really worth it. So I mean, I'm a LEED accredited architect and all that, but it's the reality is there's all these kind of things that we could do, but I'm always like, does it make economic sense to do it? Like, is it more green to spend a ton of money to do something that then you have to maintain for the next 20 years? And doesn't really have a payout to you, if you will. So whenever I get clients that say, well, I want to do a LEED accredited building or something, I'm like, that's great. Let me ask, is it because you think you're going to save money on utilities, or is it because you just think it's the right thing for the planet? It's rare that I've had somebody say they all want to save money on utilities.
That's what I was thinking.
No, and that really goes back to what we were talking about earlier about regionalism and there's no one strategy that's going to work across all places. I mean, for what, and oftentimes what's already happening there in sort of the vernacular way, if you just drive through and you see a place with a lot of rain collection, systems and stuff like that, like take maybe the Northwest, for example, that's a great area to be thinking about, oh, hey, we could use some rainwater collection here. But to your point about that's not a winning I mean, it's possible where you are, but is that really going to be an effective strategy? Probably not.
Yeah, I would so like to do a green roof. I've seen people do green roofs here.
Yeah, totally.
And it just becomes this maintenance nightmare that it's like fountains, and I don't know how it is in Texas, but my first 20 years was with a boss who eventually became a partner. And one of his sayings was, all fountains become planters in the end. And it's true. And all green roofs in Phoenix, Arizona just become, dead, dry roofs in the end, because eventually you realize you're putting more resources into keeping this stuff alive than, it does not want to be up there baking in this thin soil and so forth. But you get lead points for it. So,
One of
I
the
guess
things
it'd be more of a desert roof.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about this this house, Brent, was you're talking about we've been talking about this roof structure, and one of the things I'm seeing is that you're really emphasizing its shape through kind of having this crisp edge detail to it. So it's not a fussy fascia or the way that the transition, from the sky to the building, there's a really clean line that emphasizes the shape. How are you? Tell us a little bit about how you're doing that here. There's some sort of dark band. I'm assuming that maybe it's like a paint grip metal or something like that. That's
Yeah. In
your
this case,
edge.
the metal,
Show that other picture, Michael.
Which one?
There was that one, I think, was another one, maybe.
Which one are you looking at?
No,
that's all I got.
Well, I mean, you can even kind of see it there, where you have that crisp, sharp edge, contrasted with the underside, the soffit there. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you definitely could see it across multiple projects.
Yeah, most of these you can see where the wood goes all the way to the metal, and that's something that we use in a very sparing way here is wood, because it's so dry here, and the UV on the wood will just fry them and so forth. So with probably the exception of this home, which kind of lifts up enough that it does get some early evening and early morning sun that touches that wood, we only use it on undersides that are hopefully, pretty much never going to see direct sunlight. Like all these images of our dancing light home that you're looking at, that really dynamic, image, they were, we did a 3 or 4 day photo shoot with a photographer. We flew in from New Mexico, and they just spent like $7,000 to wash all the windows in this house and get it all just pristine, clean. And then we had the biggest monsoon thunderstorm, with the dust blowing sideways. It was just awful. And it happened most of the time that they were there. So the only time they could get shots of this house, this one looks like it's a little bit more later in the morning, but most of the shots of this house, like that interior one where you see the sun coming deep into the house, those are at like 7 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the evening, when the sun is almost horizontal to the house.
Are you using some sort of membrane roof in this, or I mean, I know different projects it's not, but take something like this for instance, or are you really wrapping a metal all the way around to that soffit?
We're just making it look like we are.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the one thing. I mean, one of the homes you showed, again, I think there was a couple pictures of it, was our Desert Wing home. And it has this pretty, let's see, that
this
one.
One?
That one, yeah.
That has a, that's copper. This one was, again, one of our first, really, I feel like really regional modern homes, because it's copper. We're in the copper state. It's got rammed earth right from the site. The forms reflect kind of the mountains that surround it, and there's a whole lot of things about this home that make it that kind of invoke the spirit of where it is. But that roof, that's where I really realized we could do this kind of simple, I mean, almost a flat roof, if you will, but give it a little bit of slope. Do the fascia's copper. Everybody looks at this house and go, it has a copper roof. No, it actually doesn't. It has a copper fascia. And the roof in this case, I think, was actually a foam roof, which I don't think you guys even do there.
Wow.
You guys are blessed in Texas. I couldn't believe when we had designed the home that we did up in Lake LBJ, and we were going to put a membrane roof because that's about all I'll spec on a quasi flat roof now is as a membrane roof. And they're like, we can do a metal roof cheaper than we can do a membrane roof. And I was like, you're kidding.
Wow.
I mean, a metal roof here is a luxury. It's an expensive luxury.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but you guys have a lot of people can fabricate and do that stuff very cost effectively. So, but yeah, so those other homes, I think almost all of them, the Desert Geo one, the one you first asked, that roof is kind of a combination. It because the wall goes up and it's copper, and then it folds over at a 1.5 in 12 slope there on the left side, because that's the minimum slope we could warranty with that kind of metal roof system. And then the upper area, it is literally flat, and there's a membrane roof up there.
That's so cool.
And then a lot of times, because we have, I would say the majority of homes we do here are hillside. There's a lot of beautiful hillsides. I don't know if you're familiar with Scottsdale and Paradise Valley, where we do most of our work, but we have a mountain preserve, and mountains that just they scatter throughout the valley like islands, if you will. And of course, so there's some really beautiful home sites that are on mountainsides, but the drawback is that you're looking down on somebody else's home half the time. And we don't have the kind of foliage, say like a Hollywood Hills or something. You see these amazing homes and Bel Air and Hollywood Hills and that. And they don't see their neighbors, and they're on like quarter-acre lots, and it looks like a jungle. Well, we don't have that here. We're in the desert. So we do a lot of ballasted roofs so that when somebody's looking down on the roof, that it looks more like the desert floor below them and kind of covers that up. But so this house, I don't think this house has a ballasted roof because there's nobody higher that can look down on the roof of this. But anyways, and then in this one, this was we probably started out thinking that we were going to run that wood from the inside and then turn it up on that fascia. And we just, to be honest with you, we tried something different. Part of it's driven by economics. It's like, well, that's a lot of wood. Wood costs a lot of money. So it's literally a synthetic stucco. It's like, are we going to like that? I mean, I'm always trying to like minimize the amount of materials. And when I look at this, I could make the argument and go, okay, you've got metal on the top, and then you've got a synthetic stucco, and then you've got wood. That's like 3 things within like 5 feet of each other. Normally that would drive me crazy, but I look at this and it's like super clean and crisp, and really happy with how it came out.
Yeah. And, it's also, I mean, obviously we're not standing there in real life, but the appearance of it here is that the exterior, this synthetic stucco is mimicked on the interior with, if that's a painted sheetrock or a plaster or whatever that is.
Exactly right.
But I think, kind of in concept, that material palette transitions really well here.
Yeah, it strengthens that indoor-outdoor feel. It blurs that line between inside and out.
That's super cool. I wanted to ask you.
I was going to make a note about that little. I mean, you said blurring the lines between inside and outside, and that I love that little courtyard there, like right in the middle, where you're bringing it, into the core of the house, and there's a tree there.
Yeah.
So that I just love that feature. I think that was really neat. Like, just you're literally bringing the outside in, and it gives you this feel that you're just in the exterior always. But I just thought that was cool. I thought it was a nice feature.
But just the idea of like the integration of the home in a garden, bringing the garden to the home, bringing the landscape into the home. So I mean, this home's kind of split into 2, if you will. I mean, the concept of this home was we have this kind of 2-story wing that's dug into the hillside on the right side. You've got bedrooms up above and kind of a flex room up there where you see actually my one of my staff standing. And then on the lower level of that, you have the primary bedroom and laundry, and then there's a garage, and then there's a course, everybody has to have a golf simulator these days. So there's a beautiful golf simulator kind of lounge room down there. But then, it's more the private side is on the right side, and then you have the active social side on the left side. And so this kind of garden element in the center kind of divides those two. So whenever you're moving from one to the other, you're always going around the garden. You're always, you're confronted with nature. It's just part of your everyday life.
Cool. Love
it. I'm a firm believer that, again, I told you I grew up running around the woods and all that kind of stuff, but I'm a firm believer, and I've read a lot of studies that seem to agree with this. Oh, did I do something there? Oh, I didn't mean to. Oh, there we're back. Are we still there? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We can hear you. Yep.
Anyways, that having that connection with nature on a regular basis. I mean, having natural daylight. I mean, the whole thing coming out with all the Ketra lighting and all this stuff. The circadian. Am I even using the right term? Circadian, light rhythms and all that stuff. To have that connection is a big part of wellness and just making people healthier and having that connection with nature. And it's just harder and harder to do today. So it's we are blessed to places like Paradise Valley, where this home is, kind of minimum 1 acre lot size, and you're able to kind of spread out a little bit and open things up. So
that's wonderful. I was curious on we had talked about this house a little bit. Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot can be said about the, dynamic shape, and I think there's some really cool aspects of the house in that. But I was curious on this soffit. You have two different types of soffits here, and that was just something small that caught my eye. One is kind of this standard pattern where you've hidden the seam, and some looks like some sort of metal. Then this other one, you've got kind of this kind of pattern, looks like standing seam that changes throughout it. And what was your conversation like with the builder, about that? How did that, were you out there literally, or your team kind of saying, hey, it needs to be this, this here, this here, this here? Or was it more kind of, here's our idea, run with it? And, how did that evolve?
So, I mean, this was one of those projects that when we had the opportunity to interview for it, I just felt like here was an opportunity, much like the Desert Wing home was 20 years before, to kind of explore and something with an owner that was wanted something that had very high expectations and had a budget to afford that, and had a builder that was just an absolute world-class builder. So yes, we drew all of these things up, but then we went out in the field and they built life-size mock-ups of many of the different conditions of this house. And there's a lot of different conditions, and then had the metal guys go out there and try to achieve certain things, because it all looks good on paper until you're like, oh, wait a minute, it rains here occasionally and that water's got to go someplace, and it can't go inside the house, and it can't go behind the wall, and can't do all those things. And so we did mock-up after mock-up after mock-up to kind of just get it right, work. Our best projects, I feel, are ones where if I know who the metal guy is, if I know who's the custom fabricator of this or that, and we can sit down and like, here's the vision, here's the budget sometimes, which may not be as much as we want. Let's figure out how to do this. Well, and then there's just the given that, we got to keep the weather out, and this thing has to, last 50 years before it needs to be maintained again, or 100 years or whatever. We sat down with those people and figured this out. So, I mean, we did, that upper roof it's its own thing, and it's floating above the walls of the house. So it doesn't actually touch the walls of the house in most places. Whereas this lower roof, which is it's kind of a mini-me, if you will. That's the primary bedroom. And then so you have kind of the great, space of the main part of the house where the big roof is with the smooth fascia. But then you have kind of the mini-me of the primary bedroom. But in this case, that roof fascia you see becomes a wall. And in this house, all the walls that are metal have, some of them start out horizontal. So that pattern that you see there started with looking at Camelback Mountain, which is what this home is all about. The whole reason that roof lifts up and lunges out that way is because the view of Camelback Mountain, that's why this client bought this site. That's it. Actually, he bought two sites side by side and then left it up to the architect to decide which one. We picked this one because it afforded basically a 180-degree view from basically head to tail of Camelback Mountain. And we wanted to do something that celebrated that you didn't know it when you entered the house through the front door, because it's very low and cozy and very, kind of private. But when you come into that great room and this roof goes from 12 feet interior and lunges up to 24 feet exterior. So standing inside and having that just kind of glass wall, which almost is invisible, in this picture, it's completely open. See, it feels cozy on the inside, but it feels very grand as well because it goes up to 24 feet on the outside. And when you come into this space, you enter on the left side and that roof, I always use kind of like a musical term, like it crescendos, it starts down low and soft, and then it just crescendos up, and it just draws your eye to Camelback Mountain and that view, and you instantly know what the house is all about. And then reinforcing that, if you look at the wood ceiling, every one of those boards is running towards the mountain. And they all have that like nickel reveal. It's all custom milled, so it has like a little nickel reveal in it. So when you're standing underneath it, your eye just follows those lines and it leads you back to that view of the outside. So everything kind of reinforces everything else. And so, the imagery of this house, to be honest with you, I don't think it really tells an accurate picture of this house, because everybody thinks, oh, this is like a heroic trophy house. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm this big, wild, crazy house. And a couple of years ago, I took an interior designer that runs a magazine here, and they were doing a story on us. And he was dying to see this house because he's seen all these amazing pictures of it. And he came to the house. I toured him through the house. He's just like, he was stunned by, it's so actually calm and peaceful and livable. This is a house that people live in. This isn't a house that, people, go to 6 weeks out of the year, and then they, go to the Hamptons or wherever, in our case, it's usually Coeur d'Alene or, San Diego or something. But no, this is a house that's meant for people to live in year round. And so it's very livable. It's very comfortable. Most of our homes tend to be for empty nesters, because that's kind of when you get to that point in life where you can afford a home like this. So we want to make sure that we design in a way that one or two people, in this case, this house was designed for one person, can sit in that living room and not feel like they're in a concert hall or a museum, that they feel cozy. I mean, that's the thing that's lost from, the old mid-century modern homes. You've got them all over, Texas. We've got a lot of them here. But there was that coziness to those. That was the thing about Frank Lloyd Wright's homes. There was a human scale to that. And now you got these big builder homes that are like, they come in, or let's do the plate heights at 12 or 14 feet, and let's just run that in every room because bigger is better. And you kind of lose touch with that. So this creates a coziness. But when you have 150 people or 200 people over for a holiday party or a campaign event or whatever, and you open those doors, it's that big, it feels just as comfortable with 200 people as it feels with 2 people.
Wow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, Brent, I actually wanted to end with one question, which is, if there was one thing what do you wish you knew early in your career?
It's funny because I got asked this last night at this talk too, and I've been thinking about how I should have articulated it better, and now I'm forgetting what the brilliant came up with at 3:00.
Come on, here's your chance.
Right. I know. I should have.
You had practice.
But the reality is, it's the power of no. I think when you're young and you're starting out and you're hungry and you want to get that job, sometimes you need that job. It's knowing when to say no. It's respecting the value of your own work. I mean, every architect knows this, but it's a hard thing. When that client says, "Can you do it for less?" Yes. Can you do it for less? Yes. Can you do it? I mean, I'm going to be 65 years old in a month, and I still love what I do the same way that I did when I was 10 years old and decided to become an architect and just design stuff for free. So if I didn't do this, if I was independently wealthy, I would probably still design stuff as a hobby, and I would enjoy doing that. Does that mean that I should give that away for free? No, it doesn't. And I think a lot of young architects that are passionate about what they do, they just want to be able to do it, and they're like, well, I really enjoy doing it, so I'll just work my butt off for less than I am worth. And so I think when you realize, when you eventually say no, whether it's like, no, I don't want to take that job, whether you're independent or go work for the wrong firm who doesn't do the kind of work you want to do, but the pay is good or whatever. It's kind of knowing when to say no, and then realizing that those people that were asking you, can you do it for less? Can you do it for less? Can you do it for less? When you say no, then you're like, oh, okay. So I've kind of gotten to where I wanted to get. I've gotten, this is the least that you'll take to do this work. And that's where you should start. And most people don't. And so they're working too hard on projects that, frankly, they may not have the same respect from the client because they took the project for less. And then when that opportunity 3 weeks later comes along, it's like, hey, here's a great paying job that's going to give you the kind of money to do the kind of job you're capable of doing. But I'm too busy doing this bad thing over here. So you say no, and you have a little faith, and eventually you say yes to the right thing, and then you get a reputation for doing really great work because people paid you what you were worth to do great work. You did it. You made or exceeded their expectation, and then you get more work. You don't get work because you're cheap.
That's beautiful. Yeah, very well said. I like that. Very good. Well, Brent, I mean, it was an absolute honor to be able to sit down and talk with you. I mean, I really appreciate you agreeing to talk to just a couple of guys from Texas about what it is that we do every day and what we love doing. So, I really appreciate your time, and thank you very much for talking with us.
You bet. It's been a pleasure. Fun Friday afternoon activity.
We'd love to have you at Texas sometime.
I forget, where are you guys based?
We're in Austin.
Oh, you are in Austin. Okay. Well, when's the next home tour?
Hey, we'll it's funny. Our company it's called Douglas Construction. We're actually kind of the head sponsor for the homes tour.
Oh, that's awesome.
And our one of our taglines has kind of been keep Austin pretty, hire an architect. And
I like it.
We really just love supporting stuff like that. So
I thought it was keep Austin weird.
Well, that's definitely, there's definitely still plenty of that.
Oh, that's great. Well, yeah, let me know. I'd love to come out, and I know some other architects from here that have traveled with me out there just to do that. And you guys do a great job, and Austin's a cool place. I enjoy spending time there.
We love it, but
really is
biased, I would say.
All right.
All right, Brent. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.